Problems with regular voluntary cooperation. The people of America had seen that cooperation between the colonies worked quite well. They had stopped Britain's taxes and harsh laws, they had won their independence from the British, and had become a new country named the United States of America. All that had been accomplished by voluntary cooperation, which is stage 3. But they hadn't yet started stage 4, legally binding cooperation. Large economic problems were about to begin for the new United States of America. The United States had economic problems after the Revolutionary War. Remember, under the Articles of Confederation, the central government could not require the states to pay any taxes, so the central government had very little money. Also, the central government could not force the states to follow laws passed for the whole country. Because it depended upon voluntary cooperation of the states, the central government couldn't solve the problems that occurred after the Revolutionary War ended. First, the war had been expensive, and the new government had to repay debts. Second, although the war was over, Britain and other countries continued to cause problems for the young country, the United States. Below are several serious economic problems the United States had after the Revolutionary War. Voluntary cooperation could not solve the problems for traders. I'll read through the scene first. The British would not allow people in the United States to trade with the West Indies. If they tried to trade, the British Navy destroyed ships that tried to trade with the French and the Dutch colonies in the West Indies. The United States could not afford to build their own navy to protect their trade ships. So the wealthy U.S. traders lost a lot of money. They were not happy. After the United States won the Revolutionary War, Britain could no longer allow merchant ships from the United States to trade with British colonies in the West Indies. Also, the British Navy destroyed American ships trading with French and Dutch colonies in the area. The refusal of Britain to allow American ships to trade in the West Indies ruined the New England triangular trade because the ports of the West Indies were part of the triangular trade. Under the Articles of Confederation, the states did not voluntarily give the central government enough money to build up a navy, and without a navy, the United States had no way to protect its merchant ships. Wealthy U.S. traders lost a lot of money because they could no longer trade with the British colonies in the West Indies, and because trading with French or Dutch colonies was very risky. The wealthy U.S. traders had to tolerate the problem because with voluntary cooperation, the government could not do anything about it. Those wealthy business people wanted a federal government that could solve that problem. A federal government is a strong central government that has power over the state governments. A federal government would have the power to tax and could raise enough money to pay for a navy. A strong U.S. Navy could force the British to allow American traders to continue to trade in the West Indies. Those wealthy business people wanted a federal government. Other countries also began to take advantage of the weakness of the new government. Before the Revolutionary War, many farmers in the western lands shipped their farm goods down the Ohio and Mississippi River to sell to the New Orleans. The then wealthy traders shipped the farm goods back to the East Coast and sold them at profit. After the Revolutionary War, Spain controlled New Orleans as well as Florida, and Spain closed the port city of New Orleans to American farmers in the western lands. Because many farmers had no place to sell their goods, the farmers had severe economic problems. Wealthy traders also had economic problems because they had no place to buy the farm goods that they normally shipped to the East Coast. Wealthy traders knew that a federal government could raise enough money to pay for a strong navy. that could force the Spanish to reopen trade in New Orleans, those wealthy business people wanted a federal government. Trade between the states was hurt by the weak central government because the Articles of Confederation allowed the states to print their own money if they wanted to. States began to print their own money to pay their bills. That printing of money caused confusion because no one could agree on how much each different type of dollar was worth. Soon, traders stopped accepting money of other states, and trade between states became difficult. The business of wealthy people who traded between the states was hurt. They knew that the federal government could prevent the states from printing paper money. Those wealthy business people wanted a federal government. Trade between the states was also hurt by the weak central government because the Articles of Confederation allowed the states to collect taxes on goods brought into their state from other states. Several states tried to raise money by charging very high taxes of that kind. Those taxes had the effect of reducing trade between the states even farther. Each state was trying to make things better only for itself. Instead of cooperating and helping each other, the states competed against each other. The competition between the states reduced trade and made the economy of the entire United States weaker. Business people knew that a federal government could force the states to cooperate and end the high taxes between states that were hurting trade. Wealthy business people wanted a federal government. The government could not pay its debts from war. The cost of fighting the Revolutionary War ran into millions of dollars. The Second Continental Congress borrowed money from other countries and from wealthy individuals to pay for the war. The Congress promised to pay back those debts after the United States government got started. During the war, the Second Continental Congress also had printed paper money called Continental dollars to pay for some of the costs of war. The new government was supposed to buy back the Continental dollars with gold or silver dollars after the war. The new government was also supposed to pay back all of the other debts from the war. But the voluntary contributions from the states were not enough to pay the debts. Because the government under the Articles of Confederation could not collect taxes, it did not have enough money to pay those debts. Nobody really wanted the paper Continental dollars anymore because people did not believe they could get gold or silver from the government. The result was inflation. Inflation is a decrease in the value of money, which results in more and more money needed to buy something. Eventually, it took 40 Continental dollars to buy what years earlier could be bought with only one gold dollar. One of the worst insults in those days was to say that something or someone was not worth a Continental, which meant not worth very much at all. Wealthy business people might lose all the money they had loaned to the government if the government could not pay back its debts. They knew that a federal government could raise enough money to pay them back, so wealthy business people wanted a federal government. Falling prices for food meant farmers could not pay their debts. Farmers who had not joined the Continental Army had been very busy during the war. There had been a need for all the food those farmers could produce. During the war, many farmers borrowed money to buy more land, animals, seeds, and tools so they could grow more food to sell. Those farmers borrowed a lot of money, and by the end of the war, they owed a lot of money. Some of the food the farmers produced was sold to the Continental Army in exchange for paper money. As you've read, those dollars became almost worthless. So the farmers had debts, but they couldn't use Continental dollars to pay those debts. After the war, the situation changed considerably for farmers. Many of the men who had been in the army were home on their own farms growing food to sell. Because there was more food for sale and less demand for food, the prices of most crops fell. Meanwhile, the value of the Continental dollar the farmers had been paid became worth less and less. In many states, debts